think there are certain bodies, student bodies or just groups that meet up. Sometimes it's property groups, sometimes it's just general, social media linked groups that have certain interests. And I think that it just takes one or two people selling a good story about career progression and they will buy in. But those groups are difficult to find. I think that is a response that lacks humility, is what I think. Because not everybody can recognize everything at first. And people's relationships and people's abilities change. In the sense that if you have an open conversation with a person that's in a role that they like, but they want to be stretched, it's up to the leader to create those communal stretch targets. And I thought, this is a people business at the end of the day. If it's all about money, then it's not for the right reasons.
Yeah.
And that's something that I've always been very proud of, the fact that I have a very good gut instinct and I can turn around and see things that other people can't necessarily see. They call that kind of high EQ. I don't know. I call it second order thinking, but I can kind of see ahead of things in certain times. And with Warren and Alex, I saw two people extremely passionate, knew their business inside out, knew their clients inside out, had a great team behind them, and it all just worked.
Welcome to the Channel Chat podcast. Hello, I'm Mark Sumner, host of the Channel Chat podcast show, and today I have the pleasure of Frances Weston, MD of North America, UK and Ireland, in person with me. In fact, I'm in her offices today in Mayfair. Channel Chat goes on the road. So how are we doing, Frances?
We are. I am fantastic. I'm so glad to have you here in our new offices. You get to actually see, live and breathe the new Econocom.
Absolutely, yeah. And as I said, this is the first time we've done it. So hopefully it's going to go really well and it's something we can continue. I want to dive straight into it, Frances, because I was looking at your background today on LinkedIn and I saw Barclays and I saw your different background. I thought, what attracted you to make the transition into sort of Econocom? Because it was I know it's a finance move, but it's still quite slightly different, isn't it? It's a bit left field.
Yeah, one of the main pieces that attracted me is before I left Barclays, I was really involved in a lot of digital transformation, some big projects around the corporate bank, and I thought to myself, like, how do I make the transition from banking into tech? And then I got a phone call. And the phone call was an explanation of a beautifully formed company in the UK, backed by a massive listed company in Brussels, but founded by a gentleman called Jean-Louis Bouchard. And I had the opportunity to meet him in person during my interview rounds. And what I found is that he started the company in 1974, grassroots, selling secondhand computers to schools. And for me, that story resonated. But not only that, but he himself resonated. He sold me the opportunity in about 20 minutes. And
that quickly?
That quickly. I had done a lot of research prior, but he said to me, after our 25-minute conversation as it was, would you like to join us? And I was dead set because it just felt right.
After 25 minutes, he offered you the job?
He did.
Now, were you looking for a job at the time?
No.
Okay. So you got headhunted, approached?
Yes.
Wow, that is...
Yeah. He had done a lot of research and I'd met a lot of other colleagues prior. So he had a lot of due diligence under his belt and he had done, just asked me a lot of specific pointed questions about myself, about the way that I manage, about my leadership style, and also about my passions. And for me, that was the telltale sign. I'd never had an interview that felt so natural, but also with somebody that was extremely humble for his own achievements.
And within 25 minutes, you were bought on the opportunity.
I was 100% bought. I had met a couple other individuals prior, and I believed they were also so passionate that there was a string, and that string just led to a final yes, and it was a very quick yes. There was a few more interviews thereafter, and those equally. I was always left with this: when can I join? When can I come in? And how long will it take me to move?
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, talking of moves,
yes.
To move to an MD role in a slightly different industry in lockdown.
Yes.
It's a pretty crazy time to be looking for a job. So, was that exciting for you?
The best challenge of my life, because I think that COVID was a strange one in the first couple of weeks. I'm not sure if you remember how you were in the first couple of weeks. It was either you're digging in, you're thinking it's a 2-3 week thing and I'm back in the office and here we come. Or you might be more, glass half empty, and you're thinking, well, how long is this actually going to last? And is it going to be 4 weeks, 5 weeks? And it ended up being much longer than anybody expected. So when I first started, I said to myself, how am I going to make an impact quickly? And what do I need to do in order to make sure that everybody that is in the group is feeling comfortable, at ease, and focused? And so my leadership style is very much around consensus. It's about making sure that everybody's sitting at the table, that everybody has a voice, and also that we meet up a lot. So a lot of people thought to me, okay, this is overkill. Like, we're doing MS Teams 3 times a week in the mornings. And I said, well, because if you don't, you have no purpose in the morning. It's about just setting the tone, setting the intention. So the meeting can be 10, 15 minutes, but you see everybody's face, everybody gets to say, and then after that, we go on to our own paths in order to achieve what we're meant to achieve during the week.
Did you have to adapt your leadership style? Because you mentioned there, your leadership style was about, empowering people, consensus, and yet that maybe hadn't been tested before because you'd been meeting people in person. So
funnily enough, my first role as a leader was in Barclays, and I remember the day vividly. I was awarded this role after like a certain set of interviews. They were all very different, all very technical. And I did a lot of research for them. And I was managing, for my first leadership role, 3 different locations, excluding London. So I was managing the UK, in London, where most of the people were based. And then after that came Cyprus, and then Gibraltar, and then Malta.
Right.
So if you can imagine, I was already used to doing a lot of things remotely. For me, it was not about going to an office and meeting everybody there in one place. It was about looking at the different jurisdictions, understanding the cultures, and seeing how you could create that consensus. Now, about 2 months after that role had started, I was then awarded all the Channel Islands, including the Isle of Man. So the Isle of Man, Jersey, Guernsey. And again, that suddenly became from 3 to 6 locations, and then some of those branches closed, and then it moved to Glasgow. And so it was very much the norm for me. So lockdown and managing people in Birmingham, our Birmingham office, in our New York office, in Boston, as well as in Texas, where we have people in the United States, for me, it was just part and parcel, and it was the norm.
Really?
Yeah.
Was it easy to get your messaging across? Because obviously you'd come from, as I said, Barclays, you're coming into tech now. Was it easy to get your messaging across, and the buy-in from the staff as well?
Yes, because I was very lucky that a lot of people at group level were spending a lot of time with me in order to make sure that the ambition statement was there. And our ambition statement was one of change the dynamic of our client base, move from concentration areas where we received, large payments, large revenue flows from 1 or 2 different clients, and diversify those out, but also make sure that we are in a situation where we are, I guess, looking at the entire life cycle of IT as opposed to just the financing part. So for me, I learned very quickly what the strategy, what I call the secret sauce was in France and in Germany and in Spain and all the different locations where we are in Europe. And I could easily apply that ambition statement, vision, to our colleagues here. And many were in tune, and many understood. It was just more about shaping it and creating the right dialogue to engage and create that passion for the future.
So the secret sauce.
Yes, that's secret sauce.
What is that? Because there was a lot of companies that I would have thought that when I said Econocom, they were like, who? They weren't really sure of the name in the market.
Yeah.
So if you were going to educate the listeners on who Econocom are and how they help customers.
Okay, we are Europe's largest digital contractor, and not coming from IT, that meant very little to me. So let me break that down. The first thing that we do is that we own a plethora of resellers. So we own 40 resellers across the globe. And what we do there is we sell IT equipment, all different types of IT equipment to enterprise clients, so to large business-to-business clients. That's the first thing. The second, which is the core, which is the grassroots, which is really where Jean-Louis excelled quite quickly, is financing. So all of that equipment that we sell, we also then finance. And after that, we then service, but we service in lots of different ways. So in certain countries, you'll see that we have lots of cybersecurity consultancies. We've got a lot of specialist consultancies, but we also have a lot of on-the-ground technicians doing things like break fix, Apple Care, etc. So in France, we have over 5,000 technicians on the road every single day. Yes.
That's crazy.
So
5,000?
Yeah, so we are teeny tiny here in the UK, but our entire group number is 9,200 employees. So we're a beast, but I call us more the Berkshire Hathaway of technology. We own and acquire lots of small, beautifully formed businesses such as Trams. And what we then do is we bring them in and we allow them to open up and leverage all the different opportunities that we have and have created in the group.
So let's move on to that, because I saw in the article in CRN that you acquired Trams in July. Was that the first acquisition you've done in the UK of a reseller?
No, we did a couple more in the past, but honestly didn't really work out. So we were in a situation where we needed a group that I could see an enterprise level client base. And prior to that, we had some exposure in education, some exposure in some more specialist areas. And for me, the holy grail was, how do we get a reseller that is enterprise level and that has deep ingrained relationships and has a steady Eddie, beautiful book of business where the clients rave about them more than they know? And that was Trams.
And how did you pick them? Why
Trams? Would you like to know?
Yes.
This is the funnest story of my life. So COVID happens, and I like to do, I'm a geek at heart, so I love a good bit of desktop research.
Okay.
And so imagine it's 8 o'clock, children in bed, 8:30 rolls around, Netflix is not quite ready to be turned on. And here I am on Company's House, and I'm looking. And I'm looking at CRN, I'm looking at all these different publications and just trying to pick and choose who might be a good candidate.
So you were in the market, you were looking for an acquisition.
That was in November time.
Right.
And so I had one of my colleagues who actually prepped me for today, Mary Nejru, who's our chief of staff. She also turned around and she said, okay, I'm going to also do some prep. I'm like, yes, we're all prepping together. So she sends me this spreadsheet and she's like, this one. I said, this one's too small. It's Trams. I said, this one's too small. She said, no, have a better look. I thought, okay, I'm going to have a better look. And it was at the top of the spreadsheet. We had done all this quantitative research, people. I knew more about them than they knew about me, and they always laugh about that. But that's just the way that I work. So we had done this original research. She keeps telling me, just have a look, and I'm kind of busy doing other stuff in the meantime. And she goes on maternity leave. And the CRN article goes out, and the first person to email me from that CRN article is Mr. Warren Peel. I thought, there's something strange about this. We're just going to pursue. We had the conversation. He was ready. I was ready. Alex Page, his partner, he was also ready. And then there we go.
Literally as simple as that.
It was, Warren and Alex have this amazing ability to assimilate a lot of information and to create a real transparent dialogue, which is exactly what I wanted. I had others that I'd approached and they told me things like, how much are you willing to pay? What's the number? And I thought, this is a people business at the end of the day. If it's all about money, then it's not for the right reasons.
Yeah.
And that's something that I've always been very proud of, the fact that I have a very good gut instinct and I can turn around and see things that other people can't necessarily see. They call that kind of high EQ. I don't know. I call it second order thinking, but I can kind of see ahead of things in certain times. And with Warren and Alex, I saw two people extremely passionate, knew their business inside out, knew their clients inside out, had a great team behind them, and it all just worked.
When you actually said you were obviously doing your research at home, you were profiling VARs, you said initially they were too small. What was your actual profile where you thought this would be a good acquisition?
So it actually was all in the CRN article, and the main piece, and my starting point was just revenue generation. Right. It was 50 to 150. That is our sweet spot. That will continue to be our sweet spot, whether you look at us here in the UK or you look in Germany or you look in France or Spain. It's just where we start.
And how do you see Trams fitting into that strategy? Because obviously the acquisition's gone through and you've got them now, so what's happening now?
So Trams have a really cool set of clients, and those clients want to trade internationally, and those clients have lots of different smaller, medium-sized operations in European countries. Post-Brexit, how many investors do you know said, I'm going to smack a lot of money in the UK and I'm going to see how it goes? Nobody. But Jean-Louis is a contrarian, so he came to me and he said, let's think about this in a different way. My boss is a guy called Angel Benguigui. Again, these guys they just pierce through the noise and they can just see value. So they said, what are you going to do that's going to allow you to be different in the UK? You need to find a strong foundation. And that essentially was Trams. And the reason what they saw and what then I began to see and what Trams saw immediately. So Angel, Jean-Louis, Trams, they could see this and I'm still trying to figure it out. They say, oh, look, we have this client. They have an office in Germany. They have an office in Spain. They have an office in Italy, et cetera, et cetera. They all need equipment.
Yeah.
And then they can see it in their eyes. I thought, oh my goodness.
Serious leverage.
How did I not see that? So if you have a client with 4, 5, 6, 7 different locations and they all need the same print of equipment because of the fact that they are, working on a global procurement model, or they're just, they have got specific needs, they are very much going to find difficulty in looking at all the different singular resellers in all the different countries, and somebody just needs to connect the dots for them. And that's what we do so beautifully.
Do you see that when companies in country, they want to deal with a local supplier, or do they actually think they actually want to go with a global customer that can get local supplier and goods?
So one of my colleagues says it the best in Spain. His name is Israel Garcia, and he's CEO of a group that we acquired called Altivox. He says always go global. So that means you have an overall top-down view, strategic, but then you have a local approach where you have a person that speaks the language, understands the culture, understands the whole technology language, and then can deliver on site. And that's why if Warren and Alex have an opportunity in France, we have a team in France that will pick it up and can really deliver in the best way possible. That's the local approach, and that's what we pride ourselves on.
Frances, what's your ambitions for the company now? So are you seeing it as more acquisitions or organic growth, or Both.
So on the financing side, we have been very lucky with some really, really great clients this year and last year, despite the whole COVID situation. And on the M&A side, we're open for business. We're doing a lot of work in other countries at the moment, but the UK, we're probably going to try to do one a year.
Another
until he says stop.
Really? Okay. So
we'll see what happens. But I would like to do more. It's just a question of timing and then right fit. I was lucky with Trams. I was really lucky because it all happened in such a natural way. I don't know if I'm going to get lucky again. We'll see.
But the ambition is to get another acquisition in the UK next year.
Ideally, yes, but it just depends on what happens and what pops up. We are waiting in the wings, let's just say.
Something the listeners will be really interested in, and I'm really interested in, is what are the sort of complications that are involved with when you go for an acquisition? Now, you said the Trams one was quite simple, but you had conversations with other ones that weren't so, and they may be more interested in the money. Is there sort of complications that sort of put you off and you think, actually, this deal's not going to be good for us?
For me, complications are, from an M&A perspective and just putting my banker hat on, it's all about shareholders, it's all about company culture, it's all about key man risk, financial due diligence, debt levels, different types of suppliers, and what kind of financial arrangements you have with external counterparties. I look at things in a quite methodical way. I'm quite, I like to say that I'm quite fun, but actually, being the geek that I am, I will go into balance sheets and annoy people to death around what does this mean and why is this the case. So when I start the searches, it's always very much start from a blank page, write down what are actually the prerequisites, and then work your way into the prerequisites, and then do a really cool scoring analysis at the end that my CFO, Ben Wiley, will help with. And so the complications are usually around shareholders and people.
So if a company, a top 100 VAR, is actually planning to sell and they're thinking, do you know what, I'd love to be acquired by Econocom, what have they got to do to get their house in order to sort of say, actually, we could be interested?
They have to have a good finance function.
Right.
So it can't be somebody that's just trying to, run around. Or if they don't have a good finance function, they have to outsource that to somebody else that knows exactly what they're doing. So, do the normal day-to-day legitimate exercises of, HMRC returns, all of that stuff, because that's just keeping the foundation sound. And then they also have to be well organized, and you can tell very quickly by just asking for management information. If you ask for management information and it just comes in piecemeal and you're trying to pull it all together and you can't understand, your left from the right, then that's a problem. But a lot of the candidates that I spoke to were really organized. I mean, and I spoke to many, and some to this day, like I have in my mind's eye.
Brilliant.
And they know who they are.
Oh, we'll keep that under the wraps. Now, it's obviously nearly been 2 years since you've taken over, or 2 years in March since you've taken over the helm.
Yeah.
What has excited you about the role, and what's the sort of the future, do you think, for the sector?
From a financing perspective, I think the future is the one-stop shop and asking for everything under one roof, and asking for not only everything under one roof, but being agnostic from vendors, from suppliers, from all the different counterparties, and just asking for one-stop shop. However, that said, and this is what I've always been really, really, really passionate about, the future of the industry after this is actually pre-COP 26, but it's more when you're having discussions with clients, whatever you are doing. In the past, it was always about the sale. If you were working on the distribution or the reseller side, if you're working on the financing side, working service, it's always just selling. Just selling to the client, make the sale, and then worry about the rest afterwards. That needs to change. So the future is going to be more around the sustainability element. It's going to be around have the conversation of what do you want to achieve from an ethics perspective, from a recycling perspective, from a CO2 emissions perspective, and then work backwards. And then it's what are the buying patterns? What do your actual end users need? What does it look like from a company perspective, from a subsidiary perspective, and then ask somebody to really help you out that can untie all of those knots and create more of this global approach. That is what the future needs, but the future starts with sustainability. There's no other way or else around it. And so if you talk to CPOs, if you talk to anybody in procurement, prior it was always like, is the price right? Can I get it delivered on time? Are there supply chain issues in the background? Will my users like and understand and really appreciate what we're putting in front of them? That was the question set. Now is it sustainable? What's going to happen in the second life? Can we get a third life? What's the recycling process? Is there any landfill that's basically going to be affected by the fact that we've got thousands and thousands of computers, whether they're laptops or desktops, floating around our ecosystem or our IT infrastructure? This is the changing way that we need to communicate with end users and people in decision making, places in large organizations.
Do you think that's on people's radar, sustainability? So I'm sure some of the larger enterprise organizations, but the small and medium-sized businesses, is that really what they're thinking about at the moment, sustainability?
I think that they are still price driven, but I think that we need to guide them into those discussions. And that's one of the main pieces that I try to impart on my team. It's change the way you have the conversation. Don't go in with, here's a price, here's the timing, here's what you need. It's what do you need? And then let me show you a different way as to how to achieve that. And let me show you the way that we want, that we've done it elsewhere. In 1974, when you're selling secondhand computers to schools, you're doing that already. It's part of our DNA. And I think that a lot of other organizations don't have that, and so we leverage that every single time we talk to a client.
And you think there's a real appetite now for that sort of conversation around sustainability?
Especially now.
Really?
Especially now. There's no better time, because if you want to be carbon neutral, if you're working to be a Corp B, if you're working in that direction, and there is a dislocation between what is discussed at board or what is discussed at senior management and what is discussed at middle management or what is discussed on the floor, on the front line with clients, all of that at some stage needs to trickle down across inside. It's just the way that communication works. It's happening now at the senior levels, and it will move. It will start moving around in organizations, whatever the size.
Let's move on, Frances, because it's well documented that there's still a real gender imbalance in tech. 15.9%, I think, is that the number? Is that that's the number?
Yeah.
It hasn't really moved much in 10 years, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Why do you think there's such a difference because people will be listening to this show and thinking, I'd love to be in Frances' position as an MD of an organisation.
Yeah.
Why is there such a difference in those numbers? Why is there only 15% of women in tech?
This is the holy grail question
Have you got the answer though?
that I'm still not able to answer. So I interview a lot of different people, and I have interviewed a lot of different people. Some have worked out, some have been women, some have not worked out, some have been women, some have worked out, some have been men, some of them worked out, and some have been men. You know, it is a situation where we are not giving enough confidence to graduates, specifically female graduates that don't necessarily have a vocational degree in technology. So if you're a graduate like myself, so I studied Russian, Czech, and German.
I saw that and I was thinking,
Yeah.
I was thinking that's an unusual combination of languages to study.
Yeah, I have a mind for languages, and so I studied Japanese and Italian and lots of different languages. And my dad actually turned around and said, if you study one more language and you don't do something vocational, your life is literally
Yeah.
And I said, okay, I'll try to go do something vocational. So what do? I become a trader. Like, probably not the best thing to do. But I liked the culture at the time, and I thought, it's interesting, it's fast moving, it's very much, numeric. You have to be smart, you have to be sharp, and you have to do a lot of study and a lot of research. So again, it appeals to the geeky.
To the geeky side of you.
So I know many women that want to make the transition, but they pigeonhole themselves too quickly. So when they get out of university, somebody tells them something. If I believed every single thing that people told me of what I was meant to be at a young age, from 10 to 20, I would be nowhere. Perhaps I would be homeless. I was told in many circumstances I should be an actress, a ballerina, a clerk, a lawyer, lots of different things that I was told to be. And if I were to believe any of those people, I would be nowhere today, because I would not have been passionate on any of those subjects. The idea is for a lot of the VARs out there, or people looking to hire diverse workplaces, it's about going into either universities or schools and selling the story. And the voice needs to be stronger, it needs to be more collective. So forget about competition for a second and market share, and think about how do you get conglomerates of people together to go into universities and schools and have that dynamic conversation with a women-only crowd. Because a lot of guys will turn around and say, I can do that, I understand that, I like Microsoft, I like Apple, I like Samsung, oh, I'm interested. Whereas if a woman like me has just studied languages, they're not going to necessarily find this path very easily. It needs to be shared at a much younger age. So I'm thinking, 10, 15 and upwards. So people can understand the ecosystem.
Because even in the STEM subjects, it doesn't mean even if you've done computer science or maths or whatever it is, you should be going into tech. You've proved you've studied languages.
Yeah.
How do we attract the people that have got your background? So maybe they've done religious education, politics, whatever the degree is, but actually think they're still confused about where they want to go. How can we try and encourage those people into our industry?
I think there are certain bodies, student bodies, or just groups that meet up. Sometimes it's property groups, sometimes it's just general, social media linked groups that have certain interests. And I think that it just takes one or two people selling a good story about career progression, and they will buy in. But those groups are difficult to find. So it's about going in and having a good understanding. My best way, and I know this is crazy, but my best way is when I find somebody that's young and interested in, the tube or the bus or wherever I am, I ask them, what are you into? Who do you hang out with? What kind of video games do you play? I ask them these questions. They go, oh my God, what is this woman asking me? But for me,
who's this? No,
but I find the collective in that way. I find the collective, and I find a certain amount of, oh, you're into that? Interesting. Where do you guys meet? Oh, a lot of the time, for example, TEDx, it will attract a lot of different people. Some people will just be graduates. Some people will be looking for a new avenue. Some people are looking to switch. And it's about finding the right people at the right time and creating and evoking a certain passion in them.
So what advice would you give to someone, a young woman who wants to get into the tech industry, who wants to break into the industry but doesn't really know where to start?
The first thing is be extremely curious. That means that if you see one or two companies that they like, whether it's a manufacturer, a vendor, a bank that provides services, a service provider, whatever it is, go into company's house and understand what that business does. One of the things that I did when I interviewed at Econocom was I read the annual report. It's like 300 pages. I read it before I even got into the meeting. And so everybody asked me, how did you get that report? I said, I work at a bank. I can get the report. I said, oh, and you read it? Yeah, I read it.
Who reads that 300 pages?
I like
it. Who reads 300 pages before an interview, though?
But I don't come unprepared. That's the thing. It's just not it's not. And again, it's like pajama reading, bedtime reading. I've got 2 small children. I put them to bed, and there you are, reading through. Oh, look, they own that company. That's really cool. Oh, look, they own that company. That's really cool. Oh, look, he started the company like this. That's really cool, too. Oh, look, the CEO does that. Oh, he runs all of those countries. Like my boss runs 16, 17 countries. That's really cool. I found that out in the annual report. You know, I didn't find out by asking him. And he's not on LinkedIn. He's not on social media. He doesn't want to be. Great. But
he's not even on LinkedIn.
No. And in the annual report, I find everything that I need. In the UK, the best place to go is Company's House. Go in, have your deep searches, and when you go onto Company's House, you know what the MD signed off on, you know what they're looking to do, and basically, you can at least start speaking the lingo.
You used that in your interview with him when you did it, because obviously you were mega prepared. No one reads 300 pages, Frances.
I had an iPad.
Yeah. You were scrolling with...
As I was speaking to him, I said, what's this? And how did this happen? And what's this? And I started just asking questions. And they just saw, that was my first interview with Laurent Capahos, who's left the business now, but he was essentially the person that brought me in. He sold me that first kernel of curiosity, but I had done the research prior. So it was very much oh, this is really interesting. Let's see if we can go a bit further. And then all of his answers were, yeah, we do this here, we do that there. And I thought, I knew that.
That's great. Now, when you're interviewing...
Yes.
Now, the listeners are going to think, wow, have I got to read 300 pages to be able to impress Frances? So what impresses you when someone comes to an interview with yourself?
It's the curiosity of the marketplace. So it's more about, there are lots of free publications or perhaps just news that runs around trends, market trends. If you've done research around who you think is a captive audience, obviously depends on the role.
Yeah.
So if it's a sales role, it's about who do you think the captive market audience is? How do you think that one could develop that vertical? What is it about that vertical that stands out? Is that person passionate when they speak? Very simple things. The preparation is part of it, but it's also the energy that you bring to the table.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, you must have had some funny experiences during the interviews. Have you got any sort of funny stories? What's the funniest story you've had either as an interviewee or interviewer?
So the funniest story that I've had I've got 2, but I'll only tell you the first one because the second one is not PC.
I want to hear that now as well. I want to hear both.
Okay, so we had an interview, Una and I, so Una's our HR director. We had an interview with an individual. CV was fine. There was nothing, there was nothing crazy about it, but also nothing overwhelming about it, but it was fine. I thought, okay, maybe like a blow your socks off candidate, not perfect on paper, but let's just see. And then came the pet. So I logged on 10 minutes before. I normally don't do this, but I was in that kind of situation where I was on the phone and I knew that I was going to be late. So I thought if I log on, put myself on mute and turn my camera off, he'll turn his camera on and then I'll know it's time to start and then I'll get off the phone. So trying to multitask. He doesn't see that I've logged on and he doesn't see that Una's logged on. So we're 2 at this stage and just a few minutes before start time. And then he has this really beautiful gray cat.
Stop it.
And then he sits, the gray cat is really cute. I mean, the cat, and I'm not even a cat person, but the cat was really cute. Sits on his lap and he's like caressing the cat.
This is like something out of Austin Powers.
Yeah. And then it continues, And then he realizes that there's a door open behind him. So he gets up with the cat, he closes the door, and then he starts tidying manically. And he's like, oh, this is out of place. I don't care. So he's like tidying. And then he sits down. Cat's still back on his lap. And then it's time to go. And so I turn on the camera. And there you go. The cat's kind of there for a second. And then just scurries off.
Stop it.
But he's had that entire stint while he thinks that nobody's watching. It's what you do when nobody's watching, when actually we saw everything.
Oh, the can that Mr. Jingles or whatever it is. Stop. What is the non-PC one? I've got to hear that now. Or even if you tame it down a little.
I was, finding myself. I was in interview mode, and I had worked, I guess, at BMW as my first job as an intern, and I thought that it would be easy breezy, lemon squeezy to come into London, find my ideal role. And they had offered me a full-time role in headquarters in Germany and in Munich. And I thought, oh no, I'm going to have to decline it because my life is going to be in London. I'm going to build a life for myself here, da-da-da-da. So I went into an interview. I was 100% on time, like 100% on time, on the minute. I sat into the interview in the interview lounge, and a lady comes in, and her name at the time, I think she's like in her 60s, was Ann Summers. And that was when Ann Summers was really, 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 really big, and still is, but like that was like a thing. And I thought, oh, okay. And so she sits me down. She knows that I have no experience at all. It's in media sales. And she's like, what experience do you have? I said, not really much, but I can learn. And she said to me, well, I would want you to learn, but you were actually 7 minutes late, so this interview's over. And that was it.
But you weren't late.
I wasn't late. But I thought, I'm not going to argue with you because I'm kind of scared. So
you didn't say that you weren't late. You just left.
I left. I was young and just naive, and I didn't want to have a confrontation at the time. But I thought, she really knows what she's doing. And I really...
She didn't know. That was the right thing.
But that is, that brings me back to the whole confidence piece. And confidence isn't built in a day. I wish I would have said something, but actually, was it the right role? Because every single person that comes to me at interview stages, they will know. I'm a deep listener. I love to talk. But if we're interviewing, or if I'm doing M&A or anything else like that, I listen. 80-20 rule. You're doing 80% of the talking. I'm doing 20% of the talking, and maybe less than that, depending on how the conversation emerges. And some people think that's a bit rude because I ask a question and I just sit and I listen. And I ask another question, and then I sit and I listen. And once they felt like they've got everything out, then I start, telling people about the organization, et cetera. So at first they think that I'm intimidating, if not arrogant, and it's just that I'm listening.
Do you think, when you're doing that, is there any awkward silences where they're thinking, Frances isn't really giving me anything else, she's just answering and stopping?
Loads. But it's.
Do you mind that as an interviewer?
No, I don't, because for me it's about really deeply thinking about what everybody's saying and taking it into account and giving people the time of the day. Because for me, I can easily get distracted. If the phone rings, the MS Teams chat goes, if I get an interview, an email that I'm not 100%, au fait with, I will automatically blink because I'm a multitasker. So this is my way of investing in that person from the very beginning.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So, say they do get the job and they join your team and they're super ambitious.
Yes.
How do they progress their career if they're really super ambitious and they want to get up the career ladder and get into your role?
We have many people that are super ambitious, and I said to them, there's such thing called a succession plan. So if I get hit by a bus or I decide to move on and do something else, a succession plan is in place, but you only get onto the succession plan if you tell me what you want to do. So if the ambition is an individual that is working within our credit structuring, or perhaps an individual that's working within our administrative function, if they want to become MD, they have to say something, because how are you meant to know? As a leader, you can't read everybody's minds. You can bring people along a journey, but it's about being vocal about it. And some introverted people, specifically people that aren't really open to bringing themselves or their whole selves out to work or otherwise, you have to tease it out of them. But that's really about having one-on-one conversations with everybody and coaching them in the right direction.
Do you think that's the responsibility of the leader? Because it's interesting you say that, and I hear this a lot with people saying to me, oh, Mark, I'm leaving the organisation, I didn't get recognised for the promotion. And I do say, well, did you say you wanted to go for that promotion? Did you put yourself in the shop window? And a lot of the feedback I get, Frances, is they should have recognised the talent in me, which I don't agree with, actually. I think you should be putting yourself in the shop window. But what's your view on that?
I think that is a response that lacks humility, is what I think. Because not everybody can recognize everything at first. and people's relationships and people's abilities change, in the sense that if you have an open conversation with a person that's in a role that they like but they want to be stretched, it's up to the leader to create those communal stretch targets and to advance and help and support. However, in certain circumstances, you have individuals that want instant gratification, that just want it now, and there's no patience about it. And having been at Barclays for 8 years, patience is a real asset. It's a real asset, because sometimes it's not going to just fall into your lap. It's about, what are the stepping stones that I can take in order to get to where I need to get to? And yes, sometimes those stepping stones means that you have to look elsewhere, but you know the different types of career profiles, right? Like the horizontal, the spiral, and there are 3 types of career profiles that you have, right? There are people that have like a linear career profile. So you imagine that you start in the post room and you become CEO. That's a linear profile. So you're going step by step and you're going. And you have spirals. I'm more of a spiral. So you move from one industry perhaps to another part of a bank, perhaps to another style of organization. But there's a theme that goes in the spiral, and you can see the theme pretty clearly. Then there are people that are more on the contract side that want to have the different experiences, but they don't want a permanent position, and they want to stay in one place for a couple of years, understand the culture, take on the learns there, and then move that to the next. But they're not obsessed with having an MD title or a D title or whatever title that's out there. So many people in that linear title will turn around, or that linear progression will come back and say they didn't see the talent in me. And my question for you is, flip it around. Go back to that person and ask them for feedback.
Great answer. Now, there's people that are going to be losing jobs because of COVID, or did lose jobs for COVID.
Yes.
Maybe they've had a couple of changes. What advice do you give to someone that maybe comes to an interview with yourselves and they've had, let's call them the job hoppers of the industry.
Yeah.
They've had 2 or 3 changes and they're trying to sort of get back into the industry.
Yeah.
What advice do you give to people that? Because when people, and I get it a lot, and they say to me, oh, it might be I got redundant, or I didn't like my boss, or etc. It's the wrong technology. And I try and say to them, I say, look, you can't keep on doing this, because obviously people just you don't even get to the hiring table. You know, if I send a CV to someone like yourself, sometimes it's just like, Mark, I don't want to see them because of a job hopper. So 2 questions. How do they get in front of you? Mm-hmm. And once they're in front of you, how do they then sort of explain those changes?
So for me, it's not about to job hop or not to job hop. It's about people and culture. And when you meet somebody, there is an element of gut instinct, but that can also be confused for bias, right? So if somebody has every single window of knowledge, and it might be a 6-month window of knowledge in 5 different places that are super interesting, it's important to have the discussion with them to see why, and to listen out for certain signs. So certain signs are, I didn't have a good boss, or my boss changed all of a sudden. Is that on them, or is that on the organization? So you have to assess every single candidate for their own worth, as opposed to just say, they've been here for 3 months and then they moved for another 3 months, and it was COVID, or perhaps they were sold something that wasn't necessarily on the job description. So all of those situations are unique. For me, I peel everything back and I just say, is this person a good cultural fit? And is this person going to mesh with the way that we do business and the way that we operate? Are their value sets similar to ours?
Would you say then, Frances, that if, because there's a lot of candidates that are job hoppers, whatever you want to use the term, that don't get to the hiring table because they sort of look at their CV and they think, no, we're going to dismiss them straight away.
Yeah.
What's your view? Do you look at CVs and think you're looking at experience, or when you look at a CV, what are you looking for?
I try to give everybody a chance. I think it's more, Una does the original, the usual kind of triaging, and she looks at all the different parts of experience that they've had, and then comes with but maybe this should be, a development area. And so she gives me a really good understanding of feedback prior. And then, what are interviews about? It's about getting to know people. It's not about putting people on the spot and asking them where their weaknesses lie. I mean, what's the point then? This is a people's business, which means that you've got to take it, or what's on paper, at face value, obviously, But then you just ask the question, what happened?
Yeah.
So at Barclays, in my first year, I had 7 different MDs as bosses. 7. And at times, I was in that job hopper mindset, as in 6 months in, do I want to leave?
What made you stay?
The people.
It's
I
the
found my
culture
tribe.
again. Yeah.
I had an amazing colleague who then became my boss, and he now lives in Gibraltar. But he is, and also I was hired by an amazing individual that works just around the corner here in the city, and those 2 people, we just connected, and that connection was pretty much on day dot where we still speak today. So that is what you're looking for. You're looking for the right people that will support you no matter what.
Yeah.
No matter what. And that takes time to build that trust and respect. But there is a gut, and you have to listen to that.
No.
Yeah.
My last question for you, Frances, and you're a great person to answer this because you've made the transition in from banking into tech. What are the main factors you think people should consider when weighing up whether they even want to come into the tech industry? What should they be thinking?
So many things. I don't really know where to start or how to answer that question, because tech is so broad as a statement, and it's like, what part of the ecosystem do you want to be a part of, and to figure out where your skill sets lie within that subject area. So, what part of it is it? Is it reseller? Is it the financing? Is it administration? Is it recycling? There are so many different parts. Is it that you want to go in for brand recognition and work for a great manufacturer? It's really about looking and seeing what is interesting and reading a lot of publications to start finding your passions, and maybe reaching out to people on LinkedIn that do that job now.
Yeah.
And have a discussion with them off the record. Like, can you give me 2 minutes? And can we have a really quick chat about what you do and how you got to where you got to? People that do that for me on LinkedIn, I always respond to. You know why? Because I never say no. I never say no to curiosity. It's just not my way of thinking.
Frances, you've been a great guest. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.